Welcome to Professor Ortlieb's Bluebook podcast, a series of podcasts designed to teach 1L students the basics of legal citation using the Bluebook. Previously, we've explored case citation under Rule 10 and several of Bluebook's writing style rules. In this episode, we will explore Rule 1. In particular, we're going to look at introductory signals, the order of authorities in citation, and explanatory parentheticals. As always, you'll want a copy of your Bluebook nearby as you go through this podcast. Signals can be found in Rule 1.2, with a shortened version of the rule in Blue Page's Rule B1.2. A signal is a shorthand message to the reader about what kind of level of support your citation provides for the proposition stated in your text. These signals can indicate support or contradiction, suggest a comparison, or provide background information. The signals that show support include no signal. This is where the authority directly states the proposition, is the source of a quote in the text, or was mentioned in the text itself. E.g., this signal is used where the authority is one of multiple authorities that directly state the same proposition. You can use e.g. and one case citation where you don't feel like citing all 3 or 4 cases that might have that same proposition or rule. Accord is used where the authority is one of multiple authorities directly stating or supporting the proposition, and one of the other authorities was mentioned in the proposition. So, for example, if you took a quote from case A, you could use the signal accord for case B. C is a signal that you use where the authority supports but does not directly state the proposition. This is the signal you use for processed rules. C also is a signal you use where the authority provides additional material supporting your proposition. Finally, CF is the signal that you use if the authority is different from the main proposition, but is maybe analogous enough to lend support. Signals that show contradiction include contra. This is used where the authority directly states a proposition contrary to the main proposition stated in your text. But C is used where the authority clearly supports a proposition contrary to the proposition in your main text. But CF is used where the authority supports a proposition analogous to the contrary to the main proposition. Where you want to call your reader's attention to a comparison, you would use compare, followed by a cite, with, underlined, followed by the second cite. This is where the authorities are similar or different in important respects. When you want to call your reader's attention to a source that might provide some helpful background material, you would precede that cite with the signal C generally. Like everything else in the Bluebook, signals have format requirements. First, when using a signal, remember that the signal must be underlined or italicized. In this, use the same embellishment that you would use for your case name. So if you're underlining case names, make sure you underline your signal. If italicizing your case names, italicize the signal. Remember that the space between your signal and cite is not underlined or italicized. Take a look at the example here. The first one shows this blank space between C and Smith does not contain an underline. That is what's required by the Bluebook. If your signal starts your citation sentence, then capitalize it, but where the signal is in the middle of your citation or clause, it should be lowercase. In this example, C also is in the middle of the citation sentence, therefore it is not capitalized. The order of your signals also matters. When more than one signal is used, put them in the same order as they are found in Rule 1.2. Signals of the same type are strung together in one sentence, and each authority is separated by a semicolon. Signals of different types are placed in separate citation sentences. What do I mean by same type and different type? That means any signals that show support should be in one citation sentence, but any signals that show contradiction should be in their own separate citation sentence, not attached to the signals showing support citations. So in what order should you place your authorities then within a signal? Rule 1.4 gives a detailed list of the order of authorities, but B 1.2 contains an abbreviated summary of the general order. Always list the most important or particularly helpful authorities first. Otherwise, use the following order. First, you would cite the constitutions, starting with the federal constitution, then any state constitutions, and then foreign constitutions. After constitutions would come statutes, again with that same sort of priority of federal, then state, then foreign. After constitutions and statutes, you'd list cases, starting with federal cases. Within federal cases, you need to have these basic priorities. First, put them in descending order, from the U.S. Supreme Court down to the Circuit Court of Appeals, down to the District Court. There are additional federal courts, of course, and you'll find those prioritized and those priorities listed in Rule 1.4. Once you put the cases in descending order, you'll also need to put them in reverse chronological order within their level of court. After federal cases come state cases. Once again, put them alphabetical by state. Then put them in descending authority. Then put them in reverse chronological order within the authority. After cases, you might cite legislative materials. Within legislative materials, list bills first, then hearings, then reports, then debates. Administrative materials follow legislative materials, and those are prioritized by listing executive orders first, then regulations, then proposed rules. Seventh in priority are court documents, and within court documents you're going to prioritize records over briefs over petitions. Finally, you can cite to secondary materials. Within secondary materials, you would cite to restatements before books, before articles, before internet resources. Again, remember, with every rule covered in this podcast series, you should always consult the main rules. Here, Bluebook Rule 1.4 will give you more details, and you'll want to use that to verify any work that you're doing in ordering your authorities, you're doing it correctly. Previously, we've discussed parentheticals in the context of providing court and date information on a full site. We've also explored parentheticals within the context of Rule 5, using them to attribute things like internal citations and quotes. There's one more type of parenthetical we have not explored, and that is the explanatory parenthetical. Explanatory parentheticals are used to describe the relevance of cited authority to the proposition that you've stated in the main text. They are highly recommended when the relevance of an authority isn't readily apparent. They are particularly recommended when using signals such as see also. Most explanatory parentheticals consist of a phrase starting with a present participle, a quoted sentence from the authority, or some other shorter statement appropriate to the situation. Explanatory parentheticals that are not quoting authority fall into two general categories. First, there are those that begin with a present participle. That's an ing word. They may describe the court's holding or finding. These parentheticals are not complete sentences, so they do not start with a capital letter and do not have an end mark. Instead, at the end of your parenthetical, you simply close the parentheses and add the final end mark for your citation sentence, as you can see here in this example. Sometimes, though, an even shorter parenthetical might work. Consider this second example. The main proposition is that courts have authorized a variety of methods to bring a subject into compliance with an officer's order. In this example, a simple statement of each method approved by each case is sufficient parenthetical to explain the relevance of the authority. From this citation pattern, the reader can see that the court authorized the use of pepper spray and cop, and tasers and use of force. Remember to use explanatory parentheticals carefully. Any holdings or illustrations that will be a core component of your analysis should be placed in the main text, not a parenthetical. The second type of explanatory parenthetical is one that quotes an authority. When your parenthetical, quote, reads like a sentence, you should write it like a sentence. That is, you should write the quote like a complete sentence. Start with the quotation marks, capitalize the first letter of the first word. End with the appropriate punctuation placed inside the quotation marks as required by the Bluebook. You'd close up your parenthetical with ending parentheses and add your end mark for the citation sentence. Where your explanatory parenthetical contains a shorter quote, that is, you haven't quoted a complete sentence, you should format the parenthetical the same way you would a parenthetical without a quote. That is, begin with the present participle, enclose the quote within quotation marks, but don't include any closing punctuation inside the parentheses. And remember, explanatory parentheticals are just one type of parenthetical. When ordering all of your parentheticals, from your court and jurisdiction and date parentheticals on through emphasis added and quoting parentheticals, down to your explanatory parentheticals, always follow the order found in Rule 1.5 and printed here. You've now completed Bluebook Podcast 8 on Rule 1. If you have any questions, please see me or a TA.